In Matthew 23, we're into what is traditionally called the seven woes. Essentially, this is Jesus calling them out and exposing their motives and their practices. I mean, their true essence. We're ready for verse 8 of chapter 23, Matthew. But you're not to be called rabbi, for you have only one master, and you are all brothers. Okay, let's think about that. What's that about? Well, before that, he said one of the things about the Pharisees and their strong interest, their great desire to be recognized and honored, and I mean, it's just their pride, was they loved, in verse 7, they loved to be greeted in the marketplaces and to have men call them rabbi. And that was one of the highest compliments that one serious Jew could give to another serious Jew. Well, because rabbi had two meanings, at least. One was teacher. The other was master. You put those together and you get master teacher. If you've ever been a teacher, I think you know, you would love, I didn't say this about me. It's a high compliment to be called a master teacher. Well, Jesus said, you've only got one master. All of you are brothers. What's that? We're talking level ground and equality. He goes on, and do not call anyone on earth Father, for you have one Father, and he is in heaven. Now that seems a little like, so I don't call my dad Father? Well, I don't think that's what he meant. Some people use this verse to, I mean, they use it as a direct shot to Catholics. You're not supposed to call him Father. And I guess, I don't know. But what's Jesus saying here? In a Hebrew family, the father was the most powerful and had the highest authority, except for inside the home, where often the mom, yeah, you know. Well, here's where he's going in verse 10. Nor are you to be called teacher, for you have one teacher, the Christ. The greatest among you will be your servant. For whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. What Jesus is doing is he's turning on its head what the Pharisees express as their value system. The mentality and the values of the Pharisees were firmly rooted in an honor-shame mentality. You sought honor and you defended yourself against shame. Now, I didn't realize the value in that until I read an interesting book called Seeking All of Finding Jesus. I really recommend that book to anybody who has any kind of curiosity about Muslims in the world, but you may have Muslims right across the street from you. At any rate, it expressed the fact that Islam is an honor-shame philosophy where the highest value is to be honored, and the worst that could happen to you is to be shamed. I can go into that more deeply, but I don't think I need to. The Pharisees, that was their deal. They sought honor. Jesus turns it upside down. He says, the greatest among you will be your servant. No, that's not what they thought. The greatest among you will be served. And the greater you were, the earlier you would be served. The greatest was served first. The least greatest was served last. That was the practice. And Jesus says, no. And then in verse 12, for whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. That principle is universal. In my own life, I have struggled with doing what I can to keep myself from this pharisaical pride that wants to be first. I want to be recognized. I have experienced, and I'm sure you have too, many times where my desire to be honored has just been a block to God's best in my life. The key, I think, and there's a lot of different ways to say it and think about it, but the key to any of us experiencing God's best in our lives is His grace, not our performance. And it's worth making a big deal of. James and Peter both say that God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. I want God's grace in my life. Not only do I want it, but I need it. It's the only things that are going to get me through. And the key to experiencing and receiving God's grace is humility. Years ago, at a high school camp in El Porvenir, New Mexico, up in the beautiful Sangre de Cristas, I heard a high school student give what I think is maybe some of the best wisdom I've heard on humility. He said, humiliation is the root of all humility. Well, I don't know that it's the root of all humility, but I do know if I don't humble myself, life and God will humiliate me. I don't think we deal rationally enough with this idea of humility and its connection to God's grace. You talk about it for a long, long time. I don't think I have to, make any stronger case for the fact, but and I'm talking to myself now as well as to you. I don't know that I can adequately express it in a way that will motivate me toward humility so that I can receive God's grace. Life is gonna do stuff to you, okay? It's just, if you want to blame somebody, blame Adam and Eve. Up until the point that they took the fruit and ate it, I think life worked in favor of us or them. And ever since then, it works in our favor. It's not like everything has gone wonky, but lots of things have. And this whole imbalance between humility and pride That's one of the wonkiest of wonkies in my life. Well, okay, pride. It's not going to get you what you want. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. Here's one of the things about humbling yourself and being exalted is, this is from my own experience. Not very often have I experienced exaltation immediately after humbling myself. I think for me, I'm reading this and thinking, the only way I will be exalted is to humble myself. And when I humble myself, I remove the obstacle of pride. So then God can and will at some point exalt me. And here's the hard part. I can't remember a single time when I was exalted right when I humbled myself. And to be honest with you, there are ways in which our exaltation won't really happen until we're done with this life. And then, only the humble, I truly believe only the humble will enter heaven. And at that point, I will be exalted, and so will you. Okay, move on. Verse 13. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites. And in my NIV translation, there's an exclamation point at the end of that sentence. Greek, the original language of the New Testament, didn't have punctuation marks. So it was read into it, but this was a forceful statement. You hypocrites, you phonies. You shut the kingdom of heaven in men's faces. You yourselves do not enter, nor will you let those who are trying to. See, that's another thing pride does. Pride says, you won't get what I don't have. And the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, their entire relationship to God was based on their performance. And they took great pride in their level of performance. It gets worse because they were able to look down their noses at everybody else and say, you're not as good as us. No. And that will keep you out of God's kingdom. That never happens these days, does it? Oh yeah, all the time. The word that I think most of the time we would use for that is self-righteousness. We're back to pride now. Pride, C.S. Lewis wrote well about pride. He said, the thing about pride is, it is not these wonderful feelings about what I have done. It's the idea that you can't have what I don't have. And that was the Pharisees' mentality. And Jesus said, you slam the door. I mean, okay, well, he just said you shut the door to the kingdom for others. And here's the big irony on that to me is they shut the door on themselves. There's a whole lot more to talk about in these woes, the 7 woes, but today my challenge is reflect. How you doing on this pride thing? How you doing on humility? If I feel really good about my level of humility, then I'm probably not humble. I'll see you next time on So Care with Stevie Boy.